there's been 5 CISOs in 5 years, that's a massive red flag. Run as far away as possible.
Your technical credibility is your superpower. You just need to understand how to translate that so that other people get it. It is the reason that they're going to trust you and understand that you know what you're doing. It gives you that gravitas and that stature in the room that you need.
That one thing you as a leader, you need to set the boundaries and expectations from day one.
How does that framework help leaders make better decisions in high-stakes situations?
From a personal level, understanding what your superpower is and understanding how you can pick up on those triggers that are going to push you into your anxious state is very useful from a leadership perspective. But I think understanding it for your people is even more so, because when you're in a high stakes situation, say we now think we're under some sort of attack and we are pretty convinced it's a security incident, are you going to rely on the people that are overly intuitive to figure out the problem, or are you going to rely on the people that are a little bit brave, that are going to jump into stuff, or are you going to rely on the people that are actually more, hey, I'm the compass. My superpower is I'm a compass.
First of all, no, you don't need a degree to get at a cyber job. Again, certificate and badge collection is not a necessity. The next most important thing is all about skills. Try hack me, hack the box, let's defend, and building a home lab.
Be curious yourself. Be inquisitive and let them figure out the path that they want to take without your biases jumping in place. I'm going to have that hard conversation that's uncomfortable and awkward and weird to make sure that they know that if anything like that starts to trigger them or starts to pull them into something that's not a safe situation, that they know that they can come to me and they know that what they can do and how they can access things online and who those safe people are that they can go to. So yeah, I think that's leaning into those hard conversations, oh gosh, and they're uncomfortable, is one of the best things that you can do to prepare your kids.
This is the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information, cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance. Our topics on this episode will be why great cyber experts make terrible leaders and how to fix it. Today we're thrilled to be joined by Tamlynn Deacon and Marius Poskus. Tamlynn is a certified business coach and former cybersecurity director who helps technical professionals transition over into executive and leadership roles. With over 15 years in cyber and over a decade leading IT and cybersecurity teams, she understands the unique challenges that cyber professionals face when moving from technical into more strategic leadership. Tamlynn is also the founder of Empower Authentic Coaching, where she focuses on empowering leaders to show up authentically and helps them work towards making a lasting impact. It's a warm welcome back to the podcast to one of our previous distinguished guests, Marius. As many of you who've watched his previous episode will know, and if you haven't, we strongly advise you do, Marius sits as Chief Information Security Officer at a leading fintech organisation and is a distinguished cybersecurity leader and board advisor, renowned for his long-standing and respected expertise within AI governance and secure technology adoption. His strategic insights have empowered organisations into strengthening their security posture whilst effectively navigating the complexities of AI integration. And Marius' commitment to advancing the cybersecurity landscape and advising vendors on developing innovative products that meet industry demand is what sets him apart from many of his peers. Tamlynn, Marius, welcome to the Secure CyberConnect podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jay.
Both Jay and myself, I'm really looking forward to today's session. And so, Tamlynn, as we kick things off, could you give the audience a high-level overview of some of the key themes we're going to be exploring today?
Yeah, sure thing. So again, thanks again for having me. And a few of the key things that I really want to make sure come across is the interesting path that we take to get to where we want to be in leadership, in cybersecurity, or in business is really, really key to find your authentic vision and how you want to get there. We shouldn't always rely specifically on things that we've always known, and we've got to learn to start looking at things from a different perspective in order to really grow and to adapt and to take full control of what it is our superpowers can give us in our careers and our lives, really. So that's pretty much it. I think we're going to cover a few things on how to take those core steps from being in middle management into senior management and a few communication tips and tricks too.
That sounds fascinating. Can't wait to unpack that. And look, many people only see the technical side of careers, especially on LinkedIn, for instance. What's something that you're perhaps proud of or passionate about that most people wouldn't know?
Well, I absolutely love this question because it gives an opportunity to give a real insight as to why I think authenticity is one of the most important things in your career. A lot of people won't know that I grew up in South Africa. You might be able to tell by the accent, but I grew up in South Africa, and it was not a typical childhood. My dad left when I was 7 years old. My mom had to work 3 jobs to keep food on the table, and I really had to grow up very, very quickly. I was studying to be a minister actually at the time, and I moved to England back in 2004. And I think really one of the core things that these disruptions and things have shifted and changed in my mind is how to be really adaptive and how to roll with the punches, how to know that things might just disappear from under your feet at any given moment. And one of the things that has really helped me with is how to be completely true and figure out how I'm going to adapt, how I'm going to shift, how I'm going to make the next best step that I possibly can with the resources that I have. And I've brought that into my leadership journey. So I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that I've learned a lot from the mistakes that I've made. I've owned up to those mistakes. I've grown through them. And it's only through recognizing and realizing that you can do these things, that you can be vulnerable, that you can share parts of your heart to people, to give them the space and the honesty that they can break those molds and those patterns that they've been in, that has really pushed my career forward. So yeah, it's that vulnerability, it's that being brave, it's that the non-tangible things that you see, as you say, Warren, on LinkedIn, that really truly have benefited me and I'm most proud of.
Really appreciate you sharing that and offering a glimpse. And without disclosing too much, of course, looking back, was there one specific challenge that early in your leadership journey specifically that shaped how you approach cybersecurity leadership today? Something you can perhaps pin down?
Yeah, it's when I get asked similar questions to this, there is this pivotal moment that happened very early in my leadership career, and this is when I was officially taking over leadership roles, because I always believe we're always leading somebody somewhere in some shape or form. We don't need a title, but when I did have that first official title, I really looked up to a woman that's made it in her career, really distinguished, really fantastic. I still look up to her today, absolutely brilliant. And I asked her a question: how do I get to where you are? How do I get to that top of your career, top of your level? And her advice was, if you want a seat at the man's table, you've got to be more like a man. And I thought, whoa, that's tough, because I'm not a man. And how do I be more like a man? For those of you who've met me in person, I'm not particularly tall, 5'2", and I'm not a big stature kind of guy. Like if you put me next to Marius, he can literally put his shoulder on my hand, and it's quite ridiculous, our height difference. So pretending to be something I'm not, an entire different gender, to be loud and, hey, here I am in your space, when actually I'm quite reserved and quiet, and yeah, it's not my thing. So the lesson that I learned after trying this for a good probably 10 months or so was, not all advice is the right advice for you, right? So you take on what works for you and you reject what doesn't. And it was only in that moment, only in that, hold on, this isn't working for me, and if anything, I'm hating my job more than ever, and I don't want to go in this direction, is actually, yeah, it doesn't work for me. So why am I trying? Why don't I be more me? Because nobody else can do that. And surely there's value in being me. And luckily that was really early on. So that was quite an impactful shift in my mindset of, you know what, sometimes even the greatest people and the people you respect the most are going to give you advice that just doesn't fit.
Well, I appreciate you sharing there. And I do commend you for everything you've been doing thus far. Seeing you speak in person, we know some of the individuals that you work with, for instance. And Marius, keen to obviously get your perspective on things. Why do so many brilliant cybersecurity professionals struggle to move into executive roles? And what specific skills are often missing that traditional training doesn't cover?
I think, first of all, the most probably difficult thing is that I've spoken to a lot of people who wanted to make that transition, but there is no course, there is no boot camp that teaches you how to be a CISO or any sort of cybersecurity leader. And that's a difficult path because everyone has to pave their own way. And as many people there are the same amount of paths into leadership. So, and I think the other thing that people usually struggle, I often say this kind of headline is that, your technical ability gets you the job, but your communication, influence, and storytelling skills are the ones that keep you in a job. And I think there is a big disconnect in that space because most of the people that, get a seat at the table or rise through the ranks, they come through a technical route, and all of a sudden you are thrusted into a executive facing position where your communication, your leadership, your influence skills are getting scrutinized to the highest level. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's not something easy, especially if you are not used to present, not used to translate. There's a lot of learnings to be had, but I think on the flip side, cybersecurity community is unlike anywhere else in the world. The amount of support and the amount of help that people are willing to offer, that people are willing to surround you and help you and lift you up, as long as you need to be able to and be comfortable stepping out of your comfort zone, reach out to people, to the networks that you built over the years. And there's going to be people who are going to help you, who are going to coach you, who are going to provide different perspective. I think, the biggest asset and the biggest power you have when you get to the leadership is the network that you have and the people who can be your soundboard to give you advice, to share different perspectives. The one thing I always say as well, people who are building teams, if you get a bunch of people who think like you, act like you, it's very difficult to get a difference of opinion and get different ideas. So again, thinking about perspective, different opinions, get people from different backgrounds, different experiences, different, views of opinion, that's only going to help you.
And was there potentially a gap that you had earlier in your career? And, say, what was that gap and, how did you personally overcome that, Marius?
Yeah, I came, as I kind of explained, I came from the same route, I preach a lot about self-learning paths. So, my journey in the first role was self-learned. I didn't have no degrees, no nothing. And that's why I preach to people about misconceptions and myths about, journey into cybersecurity. But I was very, the thing that what separates the good people in this industry are the curiosity, the aptitude, and the attitude, which I think I had bags of it. So once I got to the leadership, I very quickly understood that, reading technical books is not going to help you. So I started stacking skills, reading books, like, for example, smartest person in the room. If you ever have a conception that you walk into a room and you are the smartest, you lose the ability to learn anything. Reading an amazing book from an FBI negotiator, how to influence people, how to communicate. I continuously step on a stage to step out of the comfort zone and learn those skills to communicate, learn how to translate the technical into the business goals. Reading, I know loads of people jump into MBA, but I think MBA is not necessarily for CISOs, but reading books like Personal MBA is a great pocket book to understand, because unless you can understand how business to the core makes money and finances, again, you struggle to get initiatives and budget approvals and things like that. So there's a number of skills that you need to stack very early in your career. And then, you continue to polish them and adapt to different organizations, to different requirements, to different environments, which are only going to help you.
No, I appreciate you sharing. And Tamlynn, I know from our times in the past in Manchester at some of the summits, for instance, you spoke about the Superpower crypto framework. How does that help leaders identify their strengths and blind spots? And how does that work in practice?
Thanks for asking that. Yeah, it's actually quite similar to what Marius has just been talking about. Is we're always on the self-learning journey, and this particular journey I started on at a very young age of trying to figure out why I think the way I think, why I do things the way I do, and adapting that and changing and moving through that. So the Superpower Kryptonite framework is this I would say probably 3 decades in the making of my brain, with the self-help, with the reading the different books, with the doing the different courses, with the understanding EQ, IQ, how to influence people, and all of those types of things. I kept finding that people kept telling you what your weaknesses were and kept telling you, oh no, you've got to work on your weaknesses in order to grow. But what I kept thinking about was actually the things that you're telling me my weakness is my greatest strength. So for example, I'm a people pleaser. It's my inherent nature. And people say, you've got to stop doing that because you're going to burn out. I'm like, but that's actually how I got to where I am. I know people, I know how to talk to them, I know how to communicate with them. So why is this a bad thing? Because surely that's a good thing. Helping people is a good thing. And I started thinking, how do we adapt and understand why these negative things, which have come up through childhood for us, how to adapt and how to break through and how to become who we're going to be one day. How do we shift that mindset from this is a negative thing to a positive thing, but with the understanding that the superpower, so for the people pleaser, there are a few of them, but there's like the intuitive is one of mine, right? Is how do I shift this idea of actually being intuitive is a superpower, but if I overuse it, I'm going to turn into people pleaser mode, and then that's going to lead to burnout. So the framework itself is based on understanding inherently what your superpowers are and how they've helped you grow. Understanding then if you overuse them, they could turn into your kryptonite and could completely break you down and derail the path that you're on, and how to learn what those are, adapt to what they are, and make the most of them in situations where your weaknesses then get flipped into your strengths so that you can adapt your career, your relationships, your own personal well-being, and all of those types of things. So it kind of starts as a questionnaire. Let's just dig into it. Let's understand who you are, how do you operate. As I mentioned, there's 10 different versions of these superpowers, and you are going to have more than one. But those top 3 are really the ones that identify your core personality, well, at least into some respect. And then those kryptonites that come off the back of those. How do you use those? How do you notice when those trigger points are happening, so that they don't completely derail you? And that's what the framework is really about. And it takes a little while to get into it, but it's about practicing that, recognizing it, catching those triggers before they explode in your face, and learning how to adapt to it.
No, that's fascinating. And for our audience, of course, stick around on the pod. We've got a special offer and announcement for you at the end of the session.
Thanks. Yeah, we do.
So guys, let's get a little bit more into talking about leadership and leadership specifically within cyber. Authentic leadership has never been more important than it is within critical and high pressure environments, and cyber is the pinnacle of that. Uncertainty, risk, quick and effective decision making is absolutely essential. So Tamlynn, within these high pressure cybersecurity roles, how can leaders typically maintain those demanding and consistently high levels of performance without, of course, burning out?
Very, very good question, and one that we can talk about for absolute hours. I think the most core thing here, and this is something that I learned the hard way, is that if you are true to yourself, if you really understand your core and your heart's purpose and your soul, you've got that value deep inside of you, you've got somewhere to retreat to find out, is this direction I want to go in? Is this the path I want to take? And with cybersecurity and a lot of technical roles, in fact, I found taking over the rest of the information and data protection and IT side of things a lot more stressful, because I grew up with cyber and I got it. But taking over this 100% uptime that we have to have, I found that along with cyber, taking those 2 things on was a lot more stressful for me. So much so that I kept pushing and I kept going, like, we need to get these things right. I need to understand things from a technical perspective that I don't get. And I got to the point about 6-7 months into the role where I couldn't go to sleep at night. I was awake and I was crying and I was in tears, and I would wake up in the morning with absolute dread thinking, why have I chosen this career? So this is why I say I learned this the hard way. Even though I've got these skills, and I've learned these things, I still had to go through this period of complete breakdown for me to learn, actually, it's not about knowing that I know how to meditate. It's not about knowing that I can exercise and work off this pent up frustration, or I need to go out and have a walk in the fresh air and play with my dog, or whatever it is. It's not about knowing those things. It's about being prepared and understanding who I am. Because when I stop doing that, when I stop being who I am and I start trying to be something for everybody else, I'm going to break down. So for me, being able to help other people see that side of themselves, to really tap into their truth and to what really makes them tick, not who everybody else thinks they should be or how they react, but who they really are, gives them that opportunity to say, you know what, this is not good for me. Something is not quite right. And I need to get that trigger point, like we mentioned with the kryptonite, and I need to do something about it. I need to adapt. I need to change. And that's practice, right? That's an everyday thing. That's not you learn this once and it's done. It's repetition and repetition and a repetition until it becomes habit, and then it becomes who your new you is. So it's not an easy, quick, how do you not burn out? This is a life choice that you make, and you got to choose yourself so that doesn't happen. And that just takes a lot of practice and work. It does take work, but it's so fulfilling once you've got there.
And we live in a time where authenticity has never had a higher currency, especially with social media and so forth. But in terms of cybersecurity, what does authentic leadership look like? How does showing up as your true self actually impact and enhance team performances?
This is the crux of it, and one of the core things that I talk about when I'm in at events and I'm on stage and I'm speaking about things. When you can be truly yourself to your team, when you can be vulnerable, when you can say, hey, you know what, guys, I'm having a tough mental health day today, I'm struggling, it opens up the space of, wow, she's having that problem, or he's having that problem. That person that I look up to, that I think is amazing and has got to this point in their career, they are struggling and they're open and honest about it. It's this little safety bubble that gives people the opportunity to be like, it's okay when I'm not okay. It's okay not to be okay 100% of the time. It's okay not to put everything into each of these little boxes and separate who I am out. I can just be me. I can just be who I am. And that level of trust gives you an opportunity as a leader to actually say, you know what, you are brilliant at what you do, and you are human. In this world of AI and machine learning and everything that's going on, they still bloody make mistakes, right? And they're not human. Of course, we're just meat sacks. We're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to break down. And being authentically you and letting people see you when you're at your happiest, and this is great, and guys, absolutely smashed these targets. Congratulations. This is brilliant. Well done. And being, I'm absolutely broken. It's been 24 hours. We've been going through a breach. We've been focusing on the stuff. I just can't anymore, everyone. I just can't. I'm going to need to lean on you for a bit. And they see that broken heart side of yourself too. It gives you this, your authentic self. It gives people that space to really be themselves. And that's the kind of leader I want to be. That's the kind of leader I want to follow. I don't want to follow someone who's fake and always smiling. It's just not real. So yeah, that's my answer. Waffled a bit there.
No, I think it's showing that vulnerability sometimes. It's important. And just staying on topic, for many cyber professionals who are looking to step into leadership, looking to move into those leadership roles, how else would you build that influence when you maybe don't quite have that authority, certainly early on in your leadership position?
Well, I think, as I kind of alluded a bit earlier, there's no predefined path, so you have to pave your way and work towards leadership. I think the one thing which I always say, there are a couple of tricks up your sleeve that you can start doing to learn the leadership, to learn the management skills. If you don't have a management position, taking up mentoring and coaching people who are one step behind, it's a great way to add and elevate those skills. It's again being person who are steps out of your comfort zone, whether it's communicating, whether it's public speaking, and adopting those skills. Sometimes you have to think about what's the best move for your career. Now, there are various ways into leadership. You can get to management positions, head of positions, get a deputy Ciso positions, and then find mentors who's going to elevate your skills and who's going to trust you to develop those skills. But another way, which we rarely talk about, but stepping into a small organization where you are the first security person, that's my route was in there. I went into an organization when I was a security engineer, security architect. I've done the hands-on bit, but then all of a sudden the business growth and needs require the security team. Therefore, you are given the reins and you are escalating your learning journey. You are, learning as you are building, but this is probably, the best way where you are allowed to experiment, you are allowed to learn, you have people around you who are going to help you, support you. That's one of the best ways to step into that. As I said, there's nothing that, there's no guarantees and there's no written script how you're going to become a leader.
I want to add to that one too, because it's super important that people realize, and you did touch on it, Marius. It's super important that people realize that there are all of those many routes in, but if you're actually going to get influenced by the time you're in that leadership position, you need to focus on building those relationships. So you spend time with the people that you want to align yourself with, that you're like, okay, I'm here and these people are at this level. And if I want to move into that position, I need to get them on side. I need that sponsorship. I need that level of they're going to have my back when I'm not in the room. And because then they're going to pull me into that. So it's that, like you've mentioned earlier, Marius, is how to influence people, how to adapt, how to communicate, how to build that relationship so that when you do finally get to that next step, you've already got a bunch of sponsors behind you.
And to both of you again, just staying on that point, in terms of leaders who are communicating and influencing at board level, is there a trade-off? Do they have to give up their technical credibility to achieve this?
No. I can keep talking, but no, you certainly don't. In fact, we can talk about the superpowers again, and we can be like, your technical credibility is how you've got to where you are. It is the reason that they're going to trust you and understand that you know what you're doing. It gives you that gravitas and that stature in the room that you need. The only thing that's lacking right now, if we're just thinking about that technical ability, is that communication. How do you translate what you know in a way that somebody else can understand it? And one of those things is super key is remember that these people are incredibly smart. They wouldn't be where they are if they weren't. So you don't have to spoon feed them. You don't have to teach them everything you know. They don't need to learn that. You are there because you know it. You just need to show them how to communicate and how to, not to communicate. You need to show them how that actually affects them. How does that impact them? What is that shift? And the best advice that I can give to anybody, and I do this with the people that I work with all the time, put it in a picture. If you can't put it in a picture, it's not simple enough for other people to understand how it's going to impact them. Not that they're not smart enough to understand it. They're just busy. Their brain is 90% full of stuff that is important to them. They've only got 1% left for you. Make it so simple that you don't use up their brain power, and they're going to appreciate that for you. Your technical credibility is your superpower. You just need to understand how to translate that so that other people get it.
Yeah.
Sorry, jump in there.
Just to add to that, even at any level, I always say to people, even though career changes and leaders and whoever they are, your technical ability, as Tamlynn said, is your superpower, but that translation is the biggest part. I always say, you can't translate something into very simple terms unless you very well understand it. And that's the key point, whatever level you are, I always say to people, if you want to truly understand the subject, teach it to your mom, to your sister, someone who's never seen cyber or tech. Once you are able to explain this to someone who has no clue about cyber, that means you know the subject very, very well.
And that's brilliant. I think to add to that as well, where we've seen a lot of leaders really struggle with that transition when it comes to board level communication, is that they can effectively communicate and understand challenges with certain board members one-on-one, but they really struggle when it comes to communicating that to a group. And to Marius's point and to yours earlier, use your existing teams, use your friends and family, and use that as practice. Because ultimately, those are the people that call you out for BS or say, that joke didn't hit, for instance.
And staying on around this sort of, we talk about breaking the career ceiling. There's been many visible and invisible barriers that can limit professional growth and development, and we know many of these are organizational structures, bias, access to opportunities, and so on. But it is a key area addressing the career ceiling, and for side professionals who may be earning around that sort of, I guess, middle bracket, or the middle to higher end bracket, around the 70 to maybe 110, 120,000 on their yearly salaries. What's that proven path to reach director or executive levels?
We've kind of touched on a few of the items that pull us there. But for me, the proven path and the side that I've seen over and over again is, if you want to be a director at a company, you need to understand the company. You forget about the cyber side of you, forget about the tech side of you. It's there, it's not going anywhere, it's here, it's going to hold you. But you need to understand why. You need to understand the purpose of this company and the culture of it, the values, what is its targets? What are we trying to meet? What is the point of this business? Why was it created in the first place? What is the culture? Why has it got a beating heart? Because if you really want to be director level, if you really want to help shape the vision of the future and how the company is going to grow and adapt, you need to think like a director. You need to start acting like it. You need to spend time with the people that you look up to, really understand, why are we got these targets? Why are we pushing for this? What does this really mean? What I've found is these people in this middle management bracket is, we just need more money, and we just need people to understand that there's too many vulnerabilities and we can't fix this and we can't do that. And it's just like, stop. They don't care. Your job is to keep the company safe. That's your job. If you want to be the person who's leading the company and you want to be on that career trajectory to get up there into those 150, 250, 350K jobs, you need to think like somebody who is there, and you need to think, what is it that I need to know? What is it that I need to learn? And then you find your path and you find your route to it. Because yes, there are some frameworks that you can follow, but every company is unique. And if you really want to get to that level in this particular company, you really need to understand the company. You need to live and breathe and feel it as part of your authentic self. Because if it's not part of your authentic self, it's not the right company. Don't push yourself to be at that level at that company. Find the one that actually fits you. Because then you'll get passionate about it and you'll get excited, and then they'll see that hunger, and then they're going to be, yes, this person wants to be here. Let's promote them.
Good advice. And just finishing on that, Marius, Tamlyn's touched on a few do's and don'ts there. Any other missteps that you could maybe shine a light on?
Yeah, I think just, to add a couple of, I guess, words and translate this, early in cybersecurity journey, you always think about fixing everything, and trying to reach the absolute security. In business terms, there is a lesson to understand about competing priorities, about budget cycles. You need to understand that you can't secure everything. You need to understand business objectives. You need to understand at the core how business makes money. Because loads of people, they think they know what business does, but how business makes money is a completely different thing might be. You need to understand that, how to prioritize, how to shape shift between various risks and what's the next milestone. You need to be able to translate, because, we keep talking about this security being a cost center. It not necessarily is a cost center, as long as you are able to translate and understand how you can enable with various security initiatives. For example, building a security question and answer bank for business development, which means you can increase the sales cycles. Adding compliance frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2 means you can expand into new territories and potentially gain more clients. If you can connect the dots, if you can connect the storytelling with the mission of cybersecurity aligning to business needs, that's a key skill and requirement to get you to the next level. And you need to work towards it. You need to get a very good understanding, and yeah, then the world's your oyster. But you also need to understand as well, to add a couple of things. Anyone who's read Ross Haliluk's book Cyber for Builders, and there's also other different avenues, getting a CISO or director of cybersecurity is not the end necessarily goal. There are other ways where, CISO is not the ceiling. We have CISOs moving into CRO positions, into CTO positions. There are CISOs who are moving into and building businesses and actually solving the real cyber problems where they see the gaps. There are various other pathways that open up for your career, as long as you are, thinking, as long as you are understanding, and as long as you're continuously developing yourself to open these new pathways.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing. Thank you.
And look, as we move on and talk about growth, building within inside of organisations. Some of our listeners, I'm sure they take a tremendous amount of value from what you've both shared thus far. But Tamlynn, why is culture fit more important than just technical skills when it comes to building the high performance teams and retaining them, more importantly?
Yeah, I keep saying this. We've touched on this already, but we kind of scratched the surface this time. The thing with culture is we learn so much more from people that are different to us than we ever can from people that are the same. And it challenges us in a way, and it challenges our biases that are in the back of our mind. It challenges how we think, how we adapt, how we change. And it gives us opportunities to really understand who we are again and what direction we really want to go to. Now, there are some baseline things here. If you look at certain companies where the culture is, we expect you to be working 75 hours a week and bleed the color. I almost said some colors that I think of companies. We expect you to bleed the company colors rather than your own blood. That's not the kind of culture for me. Some people would thrive in that situation. I know I'm not one of them. I've tried it. It's not for me. But I do know that I learned a lot about myself trying to do those types of things. And it gives me that, coming back to one of the lessons from earlier, the what isn't right for me. So culture fit is super important. And I hesitate to say the word because it makes you feel like you're part of a family, because I don't think that work should necessarily be your family. I think that there is a good balance where you spend most of your time at work. So you really should enjoy the people that you work with. You should believe in the company. You should really believe that its values are aligned with your values. But from a culture fit perspective, diversity is key for learning. And that is why I do think it is just as important. I think from a technical perspective, we have to be technically sound if we want to protect our companies, if we want to make sure that the people that are working there are being protected. Yes, we have to have those skills. But from a culture perspective, if we're miserable 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's not really going to fit well for you. So that work-life balance, again, something I hate the phrasing for, because I think we need to find a balance through everything that we do, is really, really important to get that culture fit right. Do you belong at this company? Does it feel right? Am I just chasing the next rung on that ladder? Am I just chasing the next paycheck? Or is this somewhere that actually makes me feel proud to be there? Because you feel proud to be somewhere, you're going to accelerate because you get bought into it. You really want to jump and go the extra mile, right? And that's the kind of feel I want to get when I go to work.
One thing that, a different perspective from culture, from just, what Tamlynn mentioned, is when you're looking for a new role and you're trying to step into a company, the security culture of the company is an importance. I spoke in the post previously that a lot of organizations want appearance of security, not actual security. They want a CISO because they want a CISO on an insurance paper. They want a CISO on the client-facing documents. They want a CISO on ISO frameworks. They don't want a CISO to build a cybersecurity program. And getting to understand that before you step in there is an important thing to be able to, ascertain before you step there, because you're going to be a CISO in title instead of actually CISO, achieving and doing things for the benefit of actually doing security. So, asking the right questions, understanding, simple questions. I always say, example, how many CISOs have you been through in the last 5 years? If there's been 5 CISOs in 5 years, that's a massive red flag. Run as far away as possible. Obviously they're not going to tell you that they don't want security. They're going to say we want a program and everything. But interview previous CISOs. Get to the right questions in an interview, because you never want to step into a place where you're going to be just on a poster, doing security theater instead of actually solving real security problems.
Oh, I have to jump in again because this is a topic that gets me super excited. Yes, I agree with you, Marius. That is so true. For me, I get excited when a company, and I mean this, when a company thinks they want a CISO, like you've said, but really they want it on compliance only. And I get excited going in there and figuring out, this is probably because of my, coaching ability, how do I shift the culture? How do I make them see that security is an enabler, not a blocker? And then that's when I get my real buzz. And I'm like, okay, now I know that this company has shifted from tick box function to they live and breathe security in their day-to-day lives. And I'm like, yeah, I did that. So yeah, there's two sides to that.
Same topic. I've just had an interview with Deb Ratcliffe for CSO magazine about the same topic. So the question for you, Tamlynn, is when do you decide to stick around and fight, and when do you leave?
Yes. And that is key, right? And that comes back to what I was saying about finding that core value in you. If you know right now, I'm no longer following my true purpose, and it's not giving me that passion and that excitement, and it's not giving me this sense of value, and it's fighting against who I am, then I'm out the door. And yeah, I'll give it a chance. I'll always do. I'll give it a good hard crack. But yeah, that's the piece for me, is then when that culture has shifted enough for me to be like, no, what I thought was right. And that comes back to I know when I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm going to learn from them and I'll adapt. So yeah, that's how I do it.
No, fascinating stuff. And from an organizational perspective, of course, bringing the right individuals in to protect your existing team and of course the organization, your customers and clients is really important. So Marius, I'm keen to get your perspective. What practical steps can organizations take to ensure that values align during the recruitment and the promotional process?
Well, I think first of all, you as a leader, you need to understand a couple of things. And most of us worked at some point in their careers under leaders who like to micromanage and get absolutely every decision. I always say there's a simple phrase that I share. You hire the team, therefore let them do the work. And it's absolutely the most important thing that you're ever going to do is release some of the responsibilities and accountabilities down to the team. I spoke about the important post. So I've just kind of hopefully try to connect the dots here. So I spoke about in the post that one thing you as a leader, you need to set the boundaries and expectations from day one. And I think what we struggle is when you walk into a new role, you try and impress people. So you answer emails at 11 p.m., you answer Slack messages at 10 p.m., and tomorrow that becomes an expectation. Now, not only that becomes an expectation, but you become the sole person who's answering those questions. Now, when you set the boundaries and say, I'm not looking at emails after 6 p.m., I'm not answering messages after 7 p.m., you give back the ownership and responsibility and trust in your team to answer those questions for you and give them ownership. I always build, for example, my cyber program has 10 domains. Each part of each team member owns between 1 and 2 domains. I'm there to support and guide them, but they own the domain and they build the domain how they see fit. That's the way to do it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. And can leaders succeed if they don't delegate?
No, they can't, because you essentially become tied to your ability and time to answer every single question and be in every single meeting, and it only leads to a disaster and burnout and stress that you can never there comes a point where you can't handle that capacity, because as the business and the team and everything else is going to grow, it's impossible to keep up.
I appreciate you sharing. And could you perhaps share a story of where hiring for cultural fit or even attitude over certification and the CV created an unexpected high performance team for you, Marius?
Yeah, I always talk about hiring and a couple of things. Even I share, do many lives and things like that to various people, and I always say, look, my main 2 requirements for hiring is your attitude and your aptitude. once you cover those, whatever level you are, the rest of the stuff can be taught and learned. I can't teach you passion. I can't teach you curiosity, and your continuous willing to learn and be in this cyber world. Once you got that covered, everything else can fall into place. So I think that the current cyber world, I talk with a lot of people who are trying to break into cybersecurity, and the boot camps, the certification bodies have ingrained into people's head that the more certificates, the more badges of honor you collect, the better chances of progression you have. But in cyber, it's all about skills. It's all about understanding and thinking how cyber professional thinks. It's about being empathetic. It's about being able to fit in the team and being able to solve the real cyber problems. It's, simple things. I think the world is going where it's really becoming scary. I've been talking to fellow Cisos who've been recruiting recently. I think one of the friends had 8 interviews. Out of the 8, 6 of the people had ChatGPT transcription turned on, and they were answering every single question based on ChatGPT, even though they knew that the second stage interview is going to be in the office face to face. So that really kind of begs the question of where we are going in this world.
Well, we certainly feel that the recruitment market itself's up in the air, certainly needs some sort of shaking up, especially when it comes to that physical verification, having that human in the loop in the process as such. Certainly see a lot of platforms out there trying to automate this and take humans out of that. And look, as we shift gears, Tamlynn, can we talk a bit more about the Superpower crypto framework? How does that framework help leaders make better decisions in high-stakes situations?
Yeah, sure. So from a personal level, understanding what your superpower is and understanding how you can pick up on those triggers that are going to push you into your anxious state is very useful from a leadership perspective. But I think understanding it for your people is even more so, because when you're in a high-stakes situation, say we now think we're under some sort of attack and we are pretty convinced it's a security incident, are you going to rely on the people that are overly intuitive to figure out the problem, or are you going to rely on the people that are a little bit brave, that are going to jump into stuff, or are you going to rely on the people that are actually more, hey, I'm the compass. My superpower is I'm a compass. I know the direction we need to take, and I'm steady, and I'm not going to waver from that until we figure out the path through. So understanding your people's strengths and how they adapt to the situation around them can really, really help you to find your way through those high stress situations. Understanding when they're going to falter and understanding their potential triggers also gives you that moment to slow down and be like, I know that this person is struggling. And it gives me that ability to say, hey, do you need some help? Like, do you need a minute? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to take the afternoon off? Like, maybe mid-stress, high-stress situation for you right now is not the best idea. Maybe in a week's time it will be. Maybe that's who I'm going to be calling on. But right now, putting you into this position is going to make the problem worse. And knowing that and understanding that we are different and that's okay is okay, and that's good. And that really does help us to adapt and to have the A-team at the forefront in the worst possible situations when we can. Sometimes that's impossible. Sometimes people are going to be in awful positions, especially if you've got a really small team and they're going to be struggling and you're going to hate yourself for asking them to come to work at 3 a.m. when the poop is hitting the fan. But you can also be that, I understand you. I know that this is really tough for you and I'm so sorry that I need to do this. And I promise you, when this is over, we're going to have a good debrief and we're going to figure out how to fix this, but I need your help now. And that really gives that person that understanding that you care enough about them as a leader to help you through it. It gives you the understanding for yourself that you're not just looking out for your company or for your own well-being, but you're looking out for your team's well-being, which in turn helps build that team structure and that trust and that ability to pull things together. So it's, super key. It also gives you those moments. One of the things that I often say that when I'm in talks and stuff is that moment for people to just be themselves, to say in these team meetings, hey guys, once a week, we're going to have our stand up and we're going to have a walk-in meeting, no screens. We're just going to be listening and we're going to talk about absolutely nothing to do with work. Like that moment of reset and understanding, if you understand the people's personality types, you really can help them be better versions. And it gives them that opportunity to de-stress once a week. So when those high stress situations happen, they're not as pent up as they would be without it. So, yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Some sage advice. Appreciate you sharing.
And let's talk a little bit about maybe the early years and the next generation, and what's inspiring people. Especially younger people who are looking to get into cyber, especially with it being such a fast changing and ever more challenging market than it's ever been. What advice, Marius, would you give maybe to people in the sort of late teens, young adults coming out of academia or not, who are curious about cybersecurity but just haven't got a clue where to start?
Yeah. I've done a lot of material in this kind of lately, and a couple of things that stand out to me. First of all, no, you don't need a degree to get at a cyber job. I always talk about and share my own experiences to people. Simple thing: 3 years degree does not guarantee you landing your first cyber job. So that means you're spending 3 years. If you want to go university, yeah, it's great fun and absolutely do it. But the cost and stuff, and it's no guarantees of you landing a job. Now, I myself built a self-learning path and got my first cyber job in 8 months. So that means you can cut the 2 years and the massive amount of money. Again, certificate and badge collection is not a necessity. As long as you cover operating system, hardware, and networking fundamentals, the only certificate you need is a Security Plus. That more than covers it. Because I always say to people, the next most important thing is all about skills. Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, Let's Defend, and building a home lab. All you need is up to 10 years old laptop with 16 gigabytes of RAM to build virtualization and build your home lab. You can mimic SOC and do various kind of exercises and translate those exercises into real tangible things that you learned. Once you land the job, get your employer to train you. Employers are willing to train people up, and then you can get whatever certificates you want. But don't waste your money in thinking about crazy, career aspirations and landing, masses of certifications going to get you the job. And then secondly, what I come up way too often is, whether it's Mr. Robert and all of these hacking movies, pen testing and hacking is not an entry-level job. It's near impossible to land a pen testing or a red teaming or ethical hacking job from zero. So if you're willing and you are building your entry-level role for cybersecurity, focus on things like SOC analyst, GRC. Even sometimes I say to people, taking a step back to move forward and landing a job like help desk, job like system administration, teaches you the fundamentals and gives you a springboard for in the career to cybersecurity. Because help desk job, you can land way quicker than cybersecurity job. That means that you are learning on the job, you are developing the skills needed in cybersecurity, and then you can pivot once you are ready.
Absolutely. And Tamlynn, for parents out there, would you be able to just sort of maybe encapsulate one key thing that maybe they can do to nurture that curiosity within STEM without maybe scaring or overwhelming?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it with the curiosity part. Be curious yourself. Be inquisitive and let them figure out the path that they want to take without your biases jumping in place. A lot of people come from the background and the thinking of, I want this child to follow my path or that person's path, or I know that person is really successful, so they should think that. Just forget about all of that. If someone is showing interest, and Marius has touched on the passion side of things, if they're showing an interest in going in that direction, ask them why. What is it about it? Tell me why. How are you going to do that? What do you think the answer is? And step out of that whole, I'm going to guide you as your parent, and more into that role of, I'm going to coach you, or I'm going to mentor you, and I'm going to help you understand the truth behind why you're interested in it. Because sometimes they go, oh no, the money's good. And you think, well, I'm sure, but it's a competitive market, right? You can't just jump in there and land the job that you think you want. really understand the truth of the why, understand the reasons, that'll feed that curiosity in them more than trying to force them down any particular path.
And a topic that Warren and I have talked about a lot, and we have seen some strides made now in terms of the Online Safety Act. But how can parents and educators, teachers, better protect children while still encouraging that exploration and learning element?
Yeah. Oh man. This is interesting, and this is a topic that I also often get to speak to people about, and that's actually being able to understand the technical restraints that you have and the opportunities that you've got. Know what your privacy settings are. Understand that if you keep things on a separate Wi-Fi, on a separate internet access, or however it is that you're controlling that child's access to the internet, is super important. But educate them from the beginning. You're not going to send a child to school thinking that they could go and bully somebody else, or that it's okay to watch somebody take advantage of someone. Just teach them this is a scary world, and it's a whole world that doesn't have protection in it. You just don't know what's going to come around the corner, and you've got to have those hard conversations sometimes, and you've got to educate yourself and face those scary statistics and those awful things that we see and we read about, and be like, do I want my child to be one of those? No, I really, really don't. Really, really don't. So I'm going to have that hard conversation that's uncomfortable and awkward and weird, to make sure that they know that if anything like that starts to trigger them or starts to pull them into something that's not a safe situation, that they know that they can come to me, and they know that what they can do and how they can access things online, and who those safe people are that they can go to. So yeah, I think that's leaning into those hard conversations. Oh gosh, and they're uncomfortable, is one of the best things that you can do to prepare your kids.
Absolutely. Marius, briefly, is there maybe one empowering message that you could give to the younger individuals who may be listening to this episode, who think that they're not smart enough for tech careers? I think we've touched on it to some degree, but is there something you can really land with a punch on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's my video on TikTok, which I think is currently trending, where I'm talking what are the myths and what you actually don't need for cybersecurity. You don't need math skills, you don't need coding skills for cybersecurity, only for certain careers. But I think it's about understanding, and whenever somebody sees the journey of cybersecurity, it always starts with imposter syndrome and looks like it's an impossible mountain to climb. Cybersecurity looks, there, and if you're standing in front of Kilimanjaro, it looks the same. But you understand that it's one step of a day. I think especially this current generation and culture and youngsters are living in a world like never before. The amount of information at your fingertips that are for free, it's amazing. You can learn on the go anywhere. Rewind 20 years ago, there was a completely different path into cybersecurity. So, but what you need to understand is you need to be very selective of who and where do you listen for advice. You need to be proactive, because the amount of messages I get into my, TikTok, YouTube is teach me cybersecurity, or give me the full roadmap from 0 to Z. You can't put expectations on people to do the work for you. That's why sometimes, I'm even, kind of stepping away from mentoring, because people are having expectations that I'm going to do, the work for them. You have to be proactive. I always say to people, your graft, your grind are the ones that's going to deliver the results. You need to put in the work. Cybersecurity, there is no disillusion. Cybersecurity is not an easy career, and breaking in it is probably even more difficult than ever before, but it's possible. But you can't expect, I think a lot of people coming into cybersecurity because they heard the adverts, pass this certificate, you get a 100K job. That's not the reality. They've been sold a lie. So breaking down these myths and disillusions is an important beginning. But people who are going to work hard, they can achieve a lot.
So both Tamlynn, Marius, events, summits, expos, what makes peer-to-peer conversations so valuable, and how have they shaped each of your leaderships?
We kind of alluded before, the network, the difference of opinion, the getting the soundboard and surrounding yourself by leaders from different organizations from different sizes of organization with different opinions, makes you a well-rounded person and gets you to understand and learn way more. There's everyone has a way of working, everyone has a way of achieving their goals, and sometimes even similar things, like I always say to people, like people listening to my lives in cybersecurity Q&A say, oh, I learned so much because you answered questions that I've never asked. But that's the perfect thing, is when you surround yourself in the people, there's going to be people who are going to ask different questions who you might never even thought about, but someone being able to answer those questions is going to be helpful and useful for you. So these are the kind of things that are always going to help to you. And I always say, even at any career step, going to meet people face to face, it's always going to be helpful. I often talk about building a personal brand. You get to a level where not what you know, but who you know becomes way more important in your career. Leaders who find jobs, they don't find jobs through recruitment companies or applying to jobs. They found jobs through their networks and connections that they made over the years.
Yeah, I'd add to that, you're not alone, and you notice these things. And like Marius said, you people answer questions you've never even thought of, but they also answer questions that you have thought of, and you've been too scared or too it's only me or too imposter syndrome minded to say, I need to lean on my tribe. I need to lean on other people that have gone through this, and giving you that opportunity in real life with real people, and that real connection of understanding, feeling people's energy. It's just not the same online. And having those real-time experiences really does afford you that ability to feel I'm not alone in this crazy world of cybersecurity where everything is 24/7 and never turns off. It gives you that feeling of camaraderie and actually being able to physically hug somebody. So, yeah.
And Tamlynn, as we come to the back end of the episode, could you kind of share more about sort of, Empower Authentic Coaching and how it supports, professionals who are looking to transition into leadership?
Yeah, so the company that I've created is really about doing just that. It's about helping mid to senior level people step into their executive presence, but it's also about helping groups and teams and doing group coaching of saying, how do I really understand myself and the trajectory that I'm on? Is this even the right trajectory? But with that confidence that it's not just anybody, it's not just any coach, it's someone who's lived and breathed and gone through the pain of 2 decades of IT and cybersecurity intensity. So you get this feeling of I'm building and I'm growing and I'm connecting to myself and my spirituality in some points, or my physical exercise side of things, like whatever it is that pushes you forward, you're getting that you would get with a lot of other life coaches, but you're also getting this comfort and this confidence of this person really understands. And they've been through those hard waters, they've swum through them, they've fought through those fires, they've had those sleepless nights, and you get this person that you can really have that mode of, you understand me, you understand the pain I'm going through, and I can use you as a sounding board in the midst of the madness that's going on, because you know me well enough to help pull me out of that. And that's kind of what my focus is really on. So I also do non-exec director in, virtual Ciso in, and DPO in, and all those types of things too, so that I keep current with everything that's going on. I really love going to speak at events. I really, really do, because like we've just touched on, having that human to human connection is so key, and it helps you find those right people that really do want to build their career and things that people perhaps don't even know themselves that they want to do. So yeah, that's the reason I'm passionate about this company, and why I left the really great career I was in to build it, because I just want to help people.
And look, we mentioned an exclusive announcement and obviously an opportunity for our audience. We're going to put a link in the description after, but what does that look like for our audience?
So yeah, so I do 2 core group coaching things that I do on a regular basis. One's called Tech to Exec. It's a 1-day coaching program where you spend time with your peers online, and we go through a high-level framework of your superpowers and your kryptonite, but really, really not too in-depth on that. It's more about how do you move your presence from this middle management to your senior position, or people that have recently moved into the senior positions where they're feeling really imposter syndrome, like, how did I get here? What the hell am I doing? That's kind of what that's focus session. And then the other one is the Authentic Blueprint series, which is the communication. And that's the 8-week deep dive into finding out all of your superpowers, how that breaks down, what those triggers are, how do you use those. And we do it over 8 weeks as a group training program, specifically so you've got that time to integrate what you're learning and adapting, and you've got that access to myself and to the rest of the group to bounce those ideas off of over those 8 weeks. So the offer that we're giving is for all of the listeners here. We'll put, as you said, we'll put the link and the code in there, is to get 50% off the next couple of sessions that I'm going to be running on those in the coming months, hoping for the Blueprint one to kick off in early March and the Tech to Exec probably about 8 weeks later. But yeah, we'll put the links in there.
That's brilliant, and we highly encourage our community and audience to take a look at that, share it with others that it could potentially be of value to. And Marius, before we wrap up the session, could you tell our audience a bit more about your channel, your services, and what they can expect from you in the future?
Yeah, so obviously I'm a CEO of MP Cybersecurity. So again, mainly focusing on virtual CISO, cybersecurity leadership, support and advice to small to medium businesses, helping businesses to also adopt AI securely. Also, we're running Cyber Diaries podcast where we unpack various interesting topics with cyber leaders. Especially, we lately kind of covered a lot of topics where CISOs moved into executive positions and built businesses and how they've done that. Some really great stuff in there. And yeah, just keep sharing. I guess, the one thing which I'm going to probably drop a quick hint in here. Based on the posts and some of the viral posts that I've talked about cybersecurity leadership, I uncovered a lot of problems which kind of, I think, received a resounding support and around a resounding sort of alignment with most of the people, what they're feeling in their senior and leadership positions. So I'm kind of gathering all of that, and the goal is to build probably a CISO and a leadership sort of potentially maybe a course how we can help others to answer those problems that I've been talking about. So we'll see where we're gonna get to that. But yeah, there's lots of exciting things happening. I think I kind of mentioned earlier. There's book on a cards. There is various kind of interviews that I'm doing around the circle with all of the LinkedIn popularity that came out. So keep tuned, follow me on LinkedIn, and we'll share everything in due course.
And to our audience, I encourage you to follow Marius on YouTube. Quite often he goes live, answers questions in real time, and I've certainly found it of value, and I know those of our network have. So I do encourage you to follow him.
Well, guys, what a team! Thank you to both of you. Great episode. Really good stuff. I'm sure everyone will have really enjoyed it. As always, if people want to continue the discussion, join the Secure Cyber Connect community. It's all about collaboration for tech and security professionals at no cost.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.